Zulu, you will have 20 minutes to present your solution to the judges. You will be given a warning when 5 and 2 minutes remain. After 20 minutes, the presentation will be stopped immediately. No information will be considered after 20 minutes has elapsed. Following your presentation, there will be a 10-minute question and answer. You will be given a warning when 2 minutes remain. The question and answer will be stopped after 2 minutes. You may begin when ready.
Hello again, judges. Thank you so much for taking the time to see our presentation. And here is our case on Mastercard, a new age of automated payment processing.
Visa.
Earthport.
Mastercard.
Trillions of dollars at stake. Imagine this, a small business in Spain looking to sell its products to the United States. A fast, efficient, automated global payment processing system that can do so. So many small businesses that could be connected to a global network through this payment processing system. However, Visa has the upper hand. Mastercard needs to secure a first mover advantage in order to build a global payment network for so many small businesses to be involved in a truly international business.
We live in an age of technological disruption. Started off with VHSs, turned to DVDs, now we have Netflix for viewing movies. We started with the typewriter, we got PCs to process Word documents, and now we have the internet. It's revolutionized the way we see our society and the way we conduct business. And even with currency, started with the barter system. We got cash, currency, and now that's transforming into mobile payments where you can do everything electronically, but there's still more work to be done. And this is where AI and other disruptive technologies come in, using Internet of Things and technologies such as blockchain, which we will discuss later. We are your IB consultant team.
I'm Paris Flynn, I focus on marketing.
I'm Jenna Sadecki, my specialization is management.
I'm Greg, my specialization is accounting.
I'm Kyle, and my specialization is finance.
So a brief overview of what we'd like to discuss with you today. We're going to begin with discussing Mastercard's vision and mission to really talk about the core of the strengths and the values that make Mastercard the company that it is. We're then going to go into a SWOT analysis of the company to really figure out the strengths and the weaknesses that we'd like to build upon to create a stronger network overall. We're going to discuss cross-border payments as well as the framework objectives we used to propose 2 different frameworks to really work to make Visa a more customer-centric and international company. Finally, we're going to do our final recommendation and open the floor for questions. So Visa's mission statement, which was newly instated about 4 years ago when the president was a world beyond cash. 85% of the world's transactions are still done in checks or cash. We would like Mastercard to see a more digital world, a mobile wallet, cards, more digital. So we would like to institute some framework to assist with this. The mission statement is that every day, everywhere, we use our technology and expertise to make payments safe, simple, and smart. In our research, we saw the simplicity and the security as the core of Mastercard. And now I'm going to pass it over to Greg for our SWOT analysis.
Thanks, Jenna. So SWOT analysis, we're going to look at the internal and external aspects of Mastercard that distinguishes them in the industry. So looking at the strengths first, they have a vast global presence, as I'm sure we're all aware of, and they're known for their safe, secure systems. This has built a positive brand image for the company, and it's also currently building brand equity moving forward. The weaknesses, it's a part of a 4-party ecosystem. And what that means is both Visa and Mastercard have 4 parties that are interacting in every single transaction that's made, as opposed to Amex or Discover, their other competitors, which operate under a 3-party system, which is a little bit simpler and faster to accomplish. Some opportunities we've identified are that there's emerging markets, and there's a lot of financial technology firms that are emerging, which present great opportunities for future growth for the company. And the non-cash transactions have been growing at a rate that's really promising in this industry. Some threats that you need to consider when looking at the company are listed here, but some of the main ones are cybersecurity threats that is pervasive in this industry. With mobile payments and technology, there's always going to be an issue with fraud and cyber terrorism. So I'm going to hand it off to Kyle to talk about cross-border transactions.
Thanks, Greg. So I'm going to talk about cross-border payments. So a cross-border payment is when there's a seller and buyer that are in 2 different countries. However, the transaction process can often be lengthy and long. So looking at companies such as Earthport and Transfast, they make this process a lot simpler by just connecting the bank from the payee and the payer. Now the opportunity here is immense. 22 trillion in outflow was what it was in 2015 for cross-border payments. And there's also another big opportunity. 80% of the company, 80% of all the transactions are done B2B. So it's just businesses buying inventory and raw material. However, B2C is less than 20%. And this is going to grow exponentially because as companies become more international and global based, they're going to work with customers from around the globe. So they want to be able to institute a system that allows them to make their transactions a lot easier. Next, we're going to talk about growth opportunity. Looking at the chart, this is a CAGR, so compound annual growth rate, for 4 regions of the world. Looking at 2006 upward to 2022 expected. As you can see from the 5-year span, 2012 to 2017, growth was at 46% year over year. Very big, but however, as you can see, 2017 to 2022 expected, it's even greater at 52% overall growth. So the industry and this market is significantly growing, and it's important that they create an automated technology system that will make this a lot easier and people will choose them.
So looking at the system of disruptive technologies that we've seen in the past and that we see continuing through the future, and the industry sector that Kyle just identified, how can Mastercard use these technologies to reach their overall goal, their vision of becoming the world leader in cashless payment transactions and processing?
So before devising our 2 framework options, we came up with some objectives to align with our goals and the information that we collected in our research. So first, we're really focusing on effective trajectory investments. This really comes down to just making sure that Mastercard is putting its money into the best technological investments to get an edge on the competition. Our second objective is to cultivate opportunities and enhance performance. This really comes down, again, tapping into those markets that are unsaturated and have a lot of room for growth. And finally, optimizing customer success. This comes down, there's a lot more human resources in the consideration that less human work is required with the automation taking over a lot of data analysis. So now there's more room for humans to be used in the customer service realm to make sure that all of our clients have an optimal interaction with Mastercard. So to go into a little bit more depth about our first objective, which is effective trajectory investment, it really focuses on subsidizing sustainable, diversified automation strategy solutions, and also realigning human capital funds, as I previously mentioned, into contemporary qualitative services. And our second objective, just to go into a little bit more depth here, for cultivating opportunities and enhancing performance, it really comes down to building brand equity via valued company image. And by doing these big investments with cross-border transactions, that's going to make the business look very much more advanced to potential investors, and employing creative solutions to withstanding industry blocks, again going back to what Kyle previously discussed, and reducing overall waste by way of error reductions. And our final, just to go into a little bit more depth, is engendering customer trust through the execution of continued and strengthened fraud protection, because as we know, in modern society, one of the largest concerns with making our payment transactions technological is there's a lot more risk for fraud, and that's something that we really want Mastercard to be watching out for, as well as improving the quality of customer interface interactions and growing shareholder value.
So next I'm going to talk about value chain activities. So when we instituted either framework, which we're going to discuss soon, we wanted to be able to trickle down the value starting from the support activities down to primary. So what you can see here is that when our framework will be instituted, it'll be value added into infrastructure and technology. And when that value is added there, it'll trickle down into service and primary activities, which relate directly with customer relationships, which is really going to improve the brand image.
So considering the value chain activities as well as the objectives that we created, we put together 2 comprehensive frameworks. The first of which is the CER, or our Customer Experience Recommendation. So the primary objective for the CER is to optimize customer success both nationally and internationally through effective investment, enhanced company performance, and the use of automation to support a positive customer experience overall. So this is a fourfold approach. First, with global performance enhancement, we're going to delve into cross-border transactions a bit more with Kyle on the next slide. Investment strategies in not only automation technology, but also employee training. We really want to look heavily into cross-training, not only to help in the customer service sector, but in the technology sector as well, to extend all of the build upon the strong base of security and protection that Mastercard has already instituted, as well as improving customer interface interactions. Not only do we want the customer experience to be more positive, but we want our employees to be engaged.
Looking now at the global performance enhancement, back to the cross-border payment system, it's a really outdated system in how they're monitoring overseas transactions. First, it's a multi-step process. As many as 5 banks can be involved in it, and at each step of the way, each one wants to take a cut of the fee, so it can get really expensive. It's also pretty hard to monitor fraud at each step with so many different channels. So that's why with this new disruptive technology and the automation that can be provided through the CER, this will mitigate these risks. And a couple of things that it's going to work on is, one, it's going to improve the speed to market. Typically, a transaction nowadays takes 3 to 5 business days overseas. However, when you're eliminating 5 bankers and you make it just one bank to another, it can drop it down to about 1 to 2. Looking at reputational benefits, when this automation is implemented, if it's done accurately every single time, it's going to build brand equity with the customers and improve the brand image as well. Next, looking at the CER measurement, the goal was to provide customers with an automated interactive experience for when they're conducting their business. And the evaluation is through online real-time data flow, which is going to be shown in the automated process. And it shows that with the transactions, from transaction to transaction, we want to really track the accuracy and efficiency at which they're being conducted.
So in terms of the target, we would like to gain market share through automated systems. We would like to see Mastercard really be able to increase their market share because of these systems we would like to implement. We also would like to see a rise in overall spending and in cashless transactions through a value-added customer experience. So not only do we want more customers using Mastercard in their other programs, for example, the mobile wallet, but we would like these transactions to be larger as well.
So the second proposal that we considered is the FPR, or the Fraud Profile Recommendation. This profile has its own individual objective, just as the last one did. They're both based on our 3-point objective system, but they also have their main objective. This one being to ultimately achieve complete elimination of fraudulent activities across the company and for all Mastercard clients. So this one is 5-fold as opposed to the 4-fold one previously, and it starts with developing a consumer profile score. This profile score will be created based on documenting consumer behavior, and then we will identify consumers of unusual purchases, and then a multi-step verification process. They'll be requested to go through that in order to verify whether they made the purchase or not. And so we will be collecting data to create these profiles based on a lot of information that we gather on the client. This will include their typical locations where they're making their purchases regularly, also what the nature of their purchases tend to be, the price range of their general purchases, and this information will be collected through social media, through information that we get through their transactions and information that they give us when they make their connection with Mastercard. This data will be used to formulate algorithms to verify the purchaser. So when transactions are made, they will be required to be within 95 to 100% match of the profile we've created for the consumer. And an automated notification will be sent to the consumer if there is a transaction that is not within the 95 to 100% match range. The consumer can verify the purchase with a multi-step verification process, and if they are unable to identify themselves as the individual consumer or unable to confirm that they were the ones that made the purchase will not be transacted. So we will be measuring our FPR through a safeguard point of sale system to minimize potential for fraud. We'll be using the RPA, the robotic process of automation, to collect data on fraud activity and quantify and present it to necessary parties to update on how we are doing in minimizing fraud for the overall company throughout the years. And so our target for FPR is the short-term goal is to decrease overall fraud each subsequent year, and our long-term goal is to get the percentage of yearly fraudulent activities under the industry benchmarks. And when we looked into that, we found that the industry benchmark stands around 10.3% right now, but we're hoping that we can get significantly below that standard.
So after hearing about these two approaches, on the right-hand side we have the FPR, which we just discussed with Paris. The core of this was fraud prevention, and we're using past security innovations along with some RPA automation technology to confirm the purchaser and to enhance customer experience. This is done through the fraud score that we had before, and I think we all have an example of that.
We do.
It looks similar to this. It would have their picture, verification, and give them a score based on their purchases like we just discussed.
So they'll be able to access these profiles through their social media accounts, and this includes what I previously discussed, purchase history, top locations, and your social media accounts that you can track.
Yes. So moving forward, it unfortunately doesn't meet our second criteria or our main objective for the framework, which had to do with cross-border transactions, as Kyle had just mentioned. That takes us to the left-hand side, which is the core of customer experience. We want customers to feel successful and confident in their purchases. This will take Mastercard on a truly fluid international basis and unlock the potential of cross-border payments like we just discussed. This will be secure through the technologies of IoT, the Internet of Things, and blockchain, which is very visible and transparent throughout the value chain. Cross-training, like Jenna just mentioned, it creates an efficient and adaptable workforce that no matter how the company changes and adapts, we have cross-trained employees that can do a variety of tasks, not just answer phones or enter data into a computer. That's where the automation comes in. And this does meet our three main framework objectives.
And so as Greg previously just mentioned, also with cross-training, we'll be able to scale, Mastercard will be able to scale the business larger without having to add new employees because they will be multiverse in their skill set. So we are going to go with the CER, the customer experience strategy, because as Greg just went through, it fits with our three main objectives more effectively, and we believe that it will bring Mastercard more success in the future. So now we're going to give you an idea, as we each have our own individual strength. I'll give you the marketing, she will give you her own expertise, and so when it comes down to marketing, our decision, the CER experience, is really going to have a great impact on how this business is impacting consumers and the way we can market it. Brand recognition is going to increase. Mastercard already has excellent brand recognition in the States domestically. However, there's not a lot of recognition internationally, but by doing the proposal that Kyle mentioned, we will be able to create brand recognition globally, and that will market the company globally, and there will be a lot more client base.
From a management perspective, this framework is very comprehensive and it's all-inclusive. It doesn't focus solely on fraud or solely on customer service. It's truly all-encompassing. We can build in the cross-training to make our employees very flexible to, as Paris had mentioned, really extend their capabilities in terms of technology and innovation and creativity, as well as train them well for customer service for a positive customer experience overall.
And from an accounting perspective, the transparency and visibility that will be able to be applied to their financial statements is huge. There won't be as many needs for reconciliation. We'll have a real-time data flow where we're getting the information as it's happening, and we don't have to wait before we can report on what we're making and how we're earning money.
Now, looking at it from a finance perspective, Mastercard is a publicly traded global company. So whenever new frameworks or automation is introduced, investors will react to it as well as consumers. It's the hope that with the customer experience, that when the customer is happy and with the amount of growth that's going to be projected in this industry, it can really increase shareholder equity, increasing the price, the share of each price, and as well as the market value. So the company will have more equity to do further mergers and acquisitions in the future.
So if you can all recall the situation that Jenna detailed for us when we first entered the room, we have Visa standing on top of Mastercard in this transition going into cross-border transactions. However, if we can have Mastercard implement the CER program that we just outlined for you, we can have Mastercard take the advantage and be the more attractive option for Earthbound to partner with over Visa.
Thank you. And we now open the floor for any questions.
I'll go ahead. So, by the way, congratulations for the presentation. Some people put a lot of work, like anybody else before you. I believe that you didn't sleep too much, so
You'd be right. You'd be right.
Like nothing happened, which is great. But I hope that you're gonna party tonight. At any rate, let me get into the questions. So practically, out of the two solutions that we propose, you are suggesting that the CER solution is the one that we should be taking on, and it's fine. I want to hear your opinion on the following. I'm going to look at me as we keep using two hats. One as a user, I have a couple of Mastercards in my pocket, and also I'm the manager that needs to make a decision of evaluating many of those projects that are coming on my desk. So as a user, I need to be able to make purchases whenever I want, wherever I want. I am afraid of fraud, so I want to be protected, but at the same time, I like to make my own decisions and not fit into a specific profile that credit cards or anybody else would look at me and say, here's who you are, and maybe not so I want to change something. As a manager, I want to know how do I actually make those decisions of go, no go, and at the same time, I want to be able to understand, and I'm going to give you a metaphor here. I have a conveyor belt with onions coming in, and I let the user actually decide what's a rotten onion, and then I'll implement the automation to eliminate those. But how do I make sure that at the end, I'm not having other rotten onions that are spoiling the crop for this year? Help me to understand how your CR solution will actually help me to pinpoint this problem.
Great question. And we actually looked into a little bit of what Mastercard's currently doing to address that. They've recently acquired VocaLink, which is a company that provides that sort of transparency and automation experience. So from B2B, B2C, B2B2C, all those sort of transactions that you said that you're a manager and you're a consumer, they present a way in which that's visible to the consumer. And what was the second part of your question with the onions? I didn't quite get that.
So if the user is actually going to describe how the fraud, how he or she decides what the fraud is, how do I make sure, and I'm going to implement that, how am I going to make sure that I catch all the fraud issues?
Sure. So the fraud program that we proposed to you, the company has more of a control over exactly, so you're concerned, like you will have that control. You are able to make the decision. You can trust the automated process that's implemented to decide whether those things are fraudulent or not. Because if anything, it's even though you're worried about like the profile, it might not define you accurately. But the thing is it's based on social media, a lot of things. So we'll have a very good idea of like what your typical consumer behaviors are, and also when it comes to deciding what is fraud and what isn't fraud, you still will always have the decision at the end of the day because the verification process comes down to you. If it's you, that transaction will go through. And
does that lead to your CR process? I mean, help me to understand how that is linked to what you're proposing.
Well, the CDR has what we were talking about with like blockchain technology. That supply chain kind of layout will be very transparent. Like Paris was saying, your customer profile, it will have your like average order and normal amount of spoilage. If you're in an agricultural industry, there might be a higher amount of spoilage than if you were in a different industry like manufacturing. So if it's something out of the ordinary, it would be identified through the process. And okay.
You just answered my question.
If anything, the profile is used as an asset, so Mastercard prides itself on the security that it already provides. This provides an additional level of personalized security in addition to the strong systems that are already in place.
And to build on,
So I was going to say the app that you guys showed us that kind of gives the customer the ability to say yes or no. Is that the CER? Is that part of the CER?
Yes. Yeah, that can be implemented as well. And I was just going to build on that. Customer acceptance is a huge worry because when you're dealing with credit cards and payments, people always get a little nervous and anxious. In the fraud profile, it just gives that sort of assurance to the customer. It's a marketing tactic, but it also is helping the customer feel successful in their purchase, feel confident that they're not going to get scammed or not going to fall victim to some sort of scheme.
Yeah. So the question 2 is return on investment. Did you guys spend any time on that? At all?
So we didn't focus too much on finance-heavy stuff. We wanted to, like, I was going to add on that, like, when we're doing that kind of a system, it's more cost-effective because When you have a lot of different processes and there's so many different rules, you can interchange it. That kind of system is going to be a lot more money than if you have a simple structured verification system, which is where we're going on. But as for return on equity,
Investment. Yeah, I was just going to build on what Kyle was saying. Return on investment, I think what we were trying to get at with that is, in the case it outlines that this type of technology would cost about $6 million to implement, that was given information. But what Kyle was talking about the potential of cross-border payment in that sector of the industry, it's a multi-trillion-dollar potential moving forward. So that's the type of return on investment we're trying to look for. If Mastercard is capable of being one of the first movers, a pioneer in that space, their market potential is far greater than the ones who are laggards behind them.
Kind of to build on what Greg is saying, it's a $6 million investment for a potential $22 trillion unsaturated market. So that's a very big return for what, logistically, if you look at the two numbers side by side, a relatively small investment to start.
So one quick comment, and I know the assignment asked for you guys to give two multiple solutions and then pick one, so you did that really well. I think what you did really well was both solutions were really good, so we were trying to come up with the third one,
Yeah.
which was a cross-breed.
Yeah.
So that would be, if I was a manager, so some of the customer thing, some of the blockchain thing was cool and the transaction didn't get the client, but we love that idea of saving money across. So some of those things can be implemented at the same time, I'm going to ask. If some of those things, some of those requirements were brought over, you would probably agree to that, I would think, right?
I think the beauty of the customer experience framework is really pulling in several different categories that were very, very important to not only the customer but the company. We really wanted an all-encompassing, comprehensive framework, and if we can pull in additional ideas and thoughts to really make it even more comprehensive, that's our goal. It's whatever is going to be best for the company at the end of the day.
And that would be best to integrate both, cross-border fraud attacks and how to get into that market is challenging.
And just the way that the case framed it, it made it a dichotomy of sorts. You choose one or the other, but in realistic terms, we'd like to converge.
Good job.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.